bad apples. That's typically how law enforcement officials describe officers who get into trouble. But it might surprise you to learn that there is an actual list of bad apples with 76 names of local law enforcement employees. All but 2 have quit or been fired. On Your Side's Ann Schindler investigates why these officers are still on the beat.
My experience over 35 years is the vast majority of law enforcement officers are honest. Absolutely.
Attorney Tom Bell represents criminal defendants, but he still depends on the word of honest cops.
There's kind of been a presumption that police officers are going to be reliable and truthful.
That's not always the case.
Here to announce the arrest of an employee, 5-year police officer with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Department.
When a law enforcement employee is charged with a crime or disciplined for lying, they're considered damaged goods, a liability to prosecutors. They're placed on what's known as the Brady List, a list of officers whose problems could affect their credibility in court.
It's not as if it's an option.
Chief Assistant State Attorney Lee Hutton says they created the Brady List because prosecutors are required to disclose anything about an officer's credibility that might benefit a defendant.
If criminal activity, bias, and truthfulness are probably the big 3.
That's a huge deal in the legal community. Well, I take that back. It's a huge deal in the defense legal community.
Attorney Melinda Patterson says having a Brady List officer involved in a case is a red flag.
As a defense attorney, we're supposed to be able to read an arrest report and go off of that information as being credible.
If a Brady officer is a key witness, it can compromise the entire case.
That case is going to be dismissed, and that certainly has happened in the past.
It's rare. Brady List officers aren't typically making new arrests. Every officer on the list has either quit or been fired. All but 2. One got a DUI in 2018. The other is more complicated.
Fortunately, it comes down to credibility. Is he telling the truth or not?
Attorney Anthony Rosati has strong feelings about that second officer on the Brady List. He's the reason he's on it. Sergeant J.C. Nobles was placed on the list in 2018 after a judge wrote a 13-page order finding him untrustworthy.
I was shocked to see that. You don't see too many orders where a court will come out and say that officer is not credible.
At issue was whether Nobles had probable cause for a traffic stop. Nobles claimed the driver ran a stop sign, nearly hit his police car, and fled. Witnesses told a very different story of an unprovoked stop that ended with officers beating the man whose face, even prosecutors agreed, was bruised and swollen in his mugshot. The key to the case was Noble's detailed description of the traffic stop, which he even diagrammed during his sworn deposition.
If he's going westbound, the traffic stops go away. So he had to change the story.
Nobles told the judge he realized immediately after he gave that deposition that he'd gotten it wrong, but didn't tell anyone, including the prosecutor, until a year later.
Did he or did he not run a stop sign? Did he or did he not almost crash into the officer? Did he or did he not have a seatbelt on? And all 3 of those issues, the judge found that he did not believe Sergeant Nobles.
In his order, Circuit Judge Bruce Anderson said Nobles' testimony was specifically not credible. He said the sergeant did not seem to have an accurate memory, was evasive, confrontational, argumentative, and non-responsive during cross-examination. And because he found Nobles, quote, completely and materially changed his sworn testimony about what led to the traffic stop, the judge threw out the case.
Bottom line, that was an extraordinarily courageous order. In 35 years, I don't think I've ever seen an order where a judge just expressly finds the officer's testimony can't be believed.
Nobles declined our interview requests, but former police union president Steve Zona faults the judge, not the officer.
I'm not saying he's a horrible judge. I don't have faith in his ruling that officer was not credible, and I think he's wrong.
Rather than being deceptive at his deposition, Zona says Nobles was simply poorly prepared.
He got confused in his deposition, it's plain and simple. And when he got confused, that's when he gave the incorrect testimony in his deposition.
JSO Internal Affairs investigators agreed that the incident showed a lack of preparation, not dishonesty. For that, and for failing to correct his mistake for a year, he was disciplined with formal counseling. Jacksonville Sheriff Mike Williams declined to be interviewed for this story. He also did not answer 10 questions we sent to him, including whether he'd ever read the judge's order or if being on the Brady List changes an officer's assignment.
A finding of untruthfulness is typically, my experience is that that officer is either going to resign or be fired.
The fact that Nobles continues to work patrol is unusual, simply because most Brady officers are no longer officers.
An officer is on a Brady List or doesn't have credibility.
Ann Schindler, First Coast News.
Why are they still employed?
On your side.
Now, according to available records, in his nearly 20 years with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, Sergeant Nobles has accumulated 65 discipline complaints, including the most unnecessary force complaints of any officer. He has also been involved in 5 officer-involved shootings, more than any other active duty officer. That has some questioning, why is he still on the force?
You want the community to talk about the violence that's going on in the community, but do you want also the community to talk about the bad cops that are in the street? And if you do, then you need to listen.
You can find that and much more from our 6-month investigation into the Brady List officers with this story on our website, firstcoastnews.com.
All right.